Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
WMAL. 7:06, O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here to our Friday extravaganza, last day of January, as we plow our way through the day, the week, the month, and yes, this year of 2025. A full month behind us, and we are just looking forward to more and more of the same. Coming up at 7:35, Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch. 8:15, Amber Smith, who is a former U.S. Army helicopter pilot, flew combat missions in Iraq, so she knows her way around the cockpit. We'll find out her perspective on this crash at Reagan. 8:35, Brett Baer, Fox News Channel. I am Larry O'Connor. Hey, you, I know you. You're Patrice Onwuka. How are you, Patrice?
I'm great, Larry. Happy Friday.
Amen to that. And, I've said all along, whether I approve of the cabinet selections that Donald Trump has put forth or not is really irrelevant. I think he won the election, barring some sort of extraordinary revelation about these individuals. He deserves the cabinet that he has nominated. But I am not a U.S. Senator, Patrice, nor will I ever be. Unlike you, who I think has a good shot to be a U.S. Senator.
Well, Larry, I'm sure our listeners would vote for you, right? Got to be better than what we've got already. I mean,
Ramsey Touchberry is the congressional reporter for the Washington Examiner. He's been following all of these hearings, and it appears as though some of these nominees may be on some shaky ground with the Republicans that they need to confirm. Ramsey, thanks for joining us. First of all, hot ticket there. Is it true that people are like camping out overnight and having people hold a place in line, and it's almost like a movie premiere for some of these hearings?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Well, I can say I spent the past 2 days at the RFK hearings, and you certainly had the MAHA folks, the Make America Healthy Again folks, who were out in full force. They filled up much of the gallery and the overflow room for the hearing rooms, and you had a lot of them, sort of a rowdy crowd when they would hear something that they liked or didn't like. They would let everyone know, which is unusual for a confirmation hearing.
Yeah, but I kind of like that, actually, to sort of make it seem like a bunch of soccer hooligans at a British football game, Premier League football game. But their jeers and cheers might not be enough to sway three key Republicans on this committee. That would be Bill Cassidy, the chairman, who is an MD, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski. You write that they were basically using the whole help us help you. Just say what we need you to say about vaccines, and then we will vote for them. Specifically, any suggestion that vaccines or the vaccine schedules or the additives put into vaccines could be a contributing factor to the rise in autism in this country. But Mr. Kennedy was unable to go there. So does that mean that he's lost their votes?
Not necessarily. They're holding their cards close to the chest and, not revealing how they're going to vote yet. But, it was a similar pattern that you saw with Tulsi Gabbard as well. And when she was, repeatedly pressed by Republicans about whether Edward Snowden was a traitor. So it was an interesting theme of, help us, help you with some of these nominees who, this trio that's up right now that's going through the confirmation process, RFK and Gabbard for DNI, and then Kash Patel for FBI director. These three folks are, they're definitely having to put the work in to win over some skeptics yet, and it's not yet clear whether they'll have the support in the full chamber to ultimately get confirmed.
Right now we're speaking with a good reporter from the Washington Examiner, Ramsey Touchberry. Wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of the Trump administration, and earlier this week the news about funding and the pause on the freeze on federal grants going out. Not all grants, and we know that there was a lot of clarification that had to be made about what exactly was being overseen. Do you think that whole situation has been resolved, and that even as the administration tries to again provide some great oversight and accountability for how federal dollars are going out of the kitty and what they're going towards, that kind of the miscommunications earlier this week was a little bit of an early stumbling block? You think they'll be able to overcome that, or is that just kind of like, okay, we're going to stop this for now and move on to something else?
it was a major stumble, and Republicans on Capitol Hill were not at all happy. They were all of a sudden bombarded by constituents and groups and organizations and companies that were all of a sudden thrown into this sort of state of limbo. They didn't know what was going on, and so they feel that the White House trying to roll this back a little bit or clarifying was ultimately, Republicans doing because they put pressure on the White House to say, hey, like, you guys need to have a little bit of a better idea of what's going on here. You also saw the judge in the lawsuit against the White House for this end up implementing a restraining order because of just how chaotic things were and the confusion. So it was a major stumbling block early on, and I think it shows that they're going to need to pick and choose how they target these early, spending cuts if they want to do it and try to do it in such a unilateral way without Congress's approval. Republicans, they might back the president, but their deference with some of this stuff, only goes so far when it comes to, usurping the legislative branch.
Speaking with Ramsey Touchberry, congressional reporter for The Examiner, and just a final point on this RFK questioning, specifically about the vaccines and what Cassidy and Collins and Murkowski were voicing. I mean, surely they don't think that the Secretary of Health and Human Services, regardless of his personal beliefs, will be able to unilaterally and single-handedly sort of outlaw vaccines or change vaccine policy in this country. He doesn't have the power to do that. So is it more just a concern? They just want him to say the thing that they want him to say. They don't like that he believes what he may believe? Or are they concerned that his platform and his profile will lend more people to question these vaccines? And I guess that's what is the policy they are concerned about here should Kennedy become Secretary of HHS, knowing that he is skeptical of some of our vaccine policies in this country?
It's a little bit of both there. It's one, that he would be in charge of an agency that does have a lot of power over how vaccines are approved, mandates, what have you. But also, something that Cassidy specifically raised time and time and time again was that the influence that RFK has amongst mothers, families, and just his following in general. Cassidy pleaded with him, time and time again to use that power that he has, not only as a potential cabinet pick, but as someone who has such a following and a bully pulpit as Cassidy described it. So, it's the influence factor, but then it's also the policy factor as well.
One other quick question here. I saw that the Democrats boycotted the committee vote on Russ Vought for director of OMB. They had a quorum. The Republicans made up enough of a quorum, so Russ Vought's moving on, right? Right, yeah.
This was a protest vote. Russ Vought is someone who, your everyday American may not have heard of. Maybe they don't know them. Russ Vought ran the White House budget office in the first administration. Trump is trying to bring him back again. And he's emerged as someone who Democrats have actually opposed the most out of even some of these other big names that we hear because of his power to, control spending.
Well, and because he knows how to run that office. Our listeners are well aware, because we're in Washington, D.C., as you know, Randy, and the WMAL listeners are plugged in. They know the power of Director of OMB. Frankly, Russ Vought is the most consequential member of this new administration, under the radar. Democrats know that, and but he's going to get through, right? It sure seems that way. If you had to bet on it right now, I see you mentioned Kash Patel might have issues. Are there Republicans who are opposed to Kash Patel?
Well, it's sort of the same way with Gabbard and RFK Jr. in that you have some folks who are on the fence, it seems, a handful of folks. And, Kash Patel is one of those folks who, over the past 4 years under the Biden administration, he was someone who, is a firebrand media figure, and he's been out there on the airwaves, conservative firebrand media figure. He's been out there on the airwaves, says a lot of stuff, and
That's why we like him.
Tried to walk yeah. He's tried to walk a little bit of it back as he, tries to allow senators to picture him in this role as one of the country's top law enforcement officials of an agency that he had, he said a lot of controversial things about. So, a lot of that stuff is getting
he told the truth, Ramsey. Truth in this town, especially in a Senate hearing, is quite controversial. But I wasn't aware that Republicans were on the fence. We'll have to watch that space, too, and we'll definitely watch your byline over at Washington Examiner as you continue to report on this. Fun times there on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Ramsey. We've got to leave it there.
Thanks so
We're
much.
up against it. In fact, we're past it. 7:17. We got to get to Jamie Whitney.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live.
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Traffic and weather brought to you by Hadid Carpet Cleaning.
Let's give you an update on what we've learned so far in just the 36 hours since that deadly no survivors mid-air collision over the Potomac. They have recovered the flight recorders from the aircraft, so that might shed a little bit of light on what may have gone on in the cabins, what may have been said, and the flight patterns, and certainly the flight path of that helicopter is in question right now. Also, it has been reported now by multiple sources that the staffing at the air traffic control tower at DCA that night was, quote, not normal. They were understaffed. They had some people who were doing double duty. Whether that was a contributing factor or not, they can't say, which is maddening because they should be able to say. Either way, just logic prevails here. The proper staffing is a certain number. They did not have that certain number. People are supposed to do certain tasks, and instead some people were forced to do multiple tasks. How that doesn't contribute to problems, you'll have to convince me. But it seems to me a logical fact that will lead to problems. Otherwise, why have the basic staff requirements that you have? So that is obviously something that they should be able to expedite the investigation into instead of dragging this out forever. When it's human error, it's remarkable to me. I understand why it's a mystery, a plane blows up, or there's a door falls off a plane. It's like, okay, you have to go back and sort of use forensic investigation to figure out what mechanical failure. This is not a mechanical failure. This is human error. Humans are involved. It should be pretty easy to start figuring out what went wrong and what procedures that are standard operating procedures were violated. Right.
Well,
what protocols were not followed. So first you say, okay, these protocols weren't followed. Great. That's a great answer. Now we know that answer. Next question, why weren't they followed? Was it deliberate? Was it neglect? Was it fatigue? But why does it take? I mean, again, I'm sorry for being frustrated, but some of these things they should know by now. They should know.
I think it's important that our listeners know exactly what we're talking about when we say one person was handling the job of two. The controller who was handling the helicopter flight paths at the time was now also instructed to handle the planes that were landing and departing. If you've watched the video, you saw that there was the ill-fated plane was on its descent at the same time that a plane was taking off, and then you had the helicopter. So you know what? Maybe there's a good reason why one controller is charged with keeping their eyes on the helicopter traffic, while another is dedicated to just watching the commercial, the airplanes taking off and landing. I mean, to merge those two, and apparently this is according to an internal FAA report that was reviewed by the New York Times, a supervisor decided to combine all these two jobs together as one around 9:30 p.m. and let one controller leave for the night. Or leave, maybe, we don't know for how long. So, I mean, I think it really is important. Is this a standard protocol? If somebody's tired, is this a break thing?
Yeah.
Is it they're just tired, ready to go for the night, and they weren't expecting a lot of traffic? How often does this happen? Is this a contributing factor to other near misses? And then how do we ensure it doesn't happen in the future?
And all of those answers, Patrice, they should have the answers now. Honestly, I mean, if you're in charge of an organization where something like this happens, you bring all of the people into the room immediately and say, okay,
so
you're supposed to have this many. Why didn't you have that many? Who authorized this? What happened? What did you say? What did you say? We know what the proper procedures are. It didn't happen. And yet it is maddening that it takes forever, and you immediately slip into this belief that people are just trying to cover their butts in this town. And we'll get the report. We'll get the report a year from now.
When there's no accountability.
But the investigation will continue, and certain facts will be leaked, I guess, for some reason, and for political purposes. And none of this is any comfort to the families who are dealing with this tragedy right now. One should presume, though, going forward, that at DCA, the airport right here in the center of our town,
yes,
with the most complicated and busiest air traffic on the planet in our nation's capital, at this point there should be zero tolerance for understaffing. Period.
Yes.
Even if it's not a contributing factor, which you cannot convince me it's not a contributing factor, but even if it's not a contributing factor, when something happens, the American people and the people who live and work in this Washington, D.C. area should at least have the comfort of knowing that our airport, with the busiest and most complicated air traffic, with military air and federal government air and local air and commercial air all converging in this little 5 square mile radius, we should at least know that we have a fully staffed airport and air traffic control tower with no tolerance for any substitutions or overlap. At the very least, we deserve that. It's 7:24.
Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
7:37 on a busy Friday in your nation's capital, 31st day of January. Thanks for tuning in here. Coming up at 8:15, Amber Smith, a former U.S. Army helicopter pilot. And then at 8:35, Brett Baer, Fox News Channel, Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka. Morning, Patrice.
Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody.
Amen. Let's turn to Tom Fitton. Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch president, who was in the room when Kash Patel was sworn in to testify to become the new FBI director. Cut 40 here. It was kind of a fun mic drop moment. Let's take a quick listen.
The rest of the interview. This is why snippets of information are often misleading and detrimental to this committee's advice and consent process.
If you consent, I would love to have 5 hours of questions, and then I could read the whole transcript.
You've got 2 minutes.
Wow.
Kash Patel in beast mode, letting Senator Klobuchar know exactly how much time she had. Tom Fitton, what did you make of Kash Patel? He was a man in command. He knew his facts. He presented himself well, but he also wasn't taking any crap, which is kind of what you want from an FBI director, I think.
You do, and the challenge for the Democrats at this confirmation hearing is they were running arguments that have already been litigated in the public during the elections, which is January 6th, and pretending that President Trump can't be trusted with the presidency because he wants justice and accountability for the abuses targeted at him. Now, they couldn't really go as much into that as they would like, but they kind of had to go through the motions in making noise about Kash Patel. And I tell you, when you look at these confirmation hearings, I just want to tell you, listeners, they're all bunk. The whole process is corrupted. They shouldn't even really be taking place since they don't provide any useful information to the senators or the public in a way that advances the Senate's advise and consent function. Look at what happened to Matt Gaetz. He was a nominee for 3 minutes. He figured out he didn't have the votes, and it was over. That's the way it should be going on with much of these appointees and nominees by a president. Mm-hmm. They get 3 minutes, practically speaking, and I don't mean literally 3 minutes. You know what I mean for the leftists doing fact-checking. And let's move on. I mean, what is it we need to know about Kash Patel that requires weeks and weeks of his political opponents combing through his background so they have a talking point on TV? It's a waste.
Yeah. What's interesting?
And I'm angry because I had to sit. Well, hold on, Patrice. I'm angry because I had to sit through it for 7 hours.
At least the chairs are soft in the hearing room, right,
Yeah,
Tom?
well,
I mean, yeah, I get you. So interestingly, this morning, Politico's headline is Kash Patel's hearing expected to produce fireworks and was mostly a dud. And they picked up on what you mentioned, which is the Democrats talking about this weird J6 choir thing. But it seems
five senators asked about the J6 choir.
Ridiculous for people who don't even know. I mean, go back and look at it yourself. But they did mention, this story talked about one line of questioning, which was really aimed at getting support from Tom Tillis, which was which was like a break with President Trump, whether the J6 people who've been charged should have been pardoned. And it seemed like Kash Patel said no. Do you think that? What should we make of that exchange?
So the issues are President Trump pardoned folks who were nonviolent. He commuted the sentences of some folks who had pled guilty to or were convicted of violence against police officers on January 6th. And Kash disagreed with President Trump on the latter. I disagree with Kash on that. I think his comments were more geared towards the FBI and law enforcement personnel he's going to have to be working with in the next for the next 10 years if things go well for him. So I wouldn't read too much into it, but, my view is that whole process was compromised. Not one prosecution was honest, and even that there were folks who did something terribly wrong and should have been prosecuted, that prosecution was not in accord with due process and the fair administration law by the goons running the Biden Justice Department. And plus, many of them had been in jail for years anyway, so it wasn't like they hadn't been punished even morally for their misconduct here. So, to me, it was sometimes you get virtue signaling all around.
Tom, I thought a powerful moment for Kash Patel was that he said, I'm the ideal person to be the director of the FBI because I know full well what the FBI can do when they act politically and outside the confines of the Constitution to try to harm someone, to try to destroy somebody, because he was the victim of it. I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit if you could. And I think it was a very powerful point to make. And I think that there's, everyone's like, oh, he's just there for revenge. No, but he does represent, he's going to walk into that room, that building, as the new FBI director, and everyone who did him wrong is going to know that. And they know that they're not going to be able to get away with it anymore because he knows full well what they did and what they can do to any innocent American.
Yeah, I mean, he was on the wrong end of subpoenas by the FBI in their efforts to destroy Trump. He was harassed by the Jack Smith team for, as he points out, weeks, and the monies he spent probably were enormous to have to deal legally with that. So he knows full well what the FBI is capable of doing in terms of being abused and misused. He's dealing with Adam Schiff, a member of Congress who in the House gloried in the abuse of this agency to target his political opponents. And and that's one of the reasons I think the Democrats were kind of cautious in dealing with Patel, even though, the feel in the hearing was they were going through the motions. I don't know how it came across on TV, but everyone was just waiting for it to be over.
It looks like it's
Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying the sense is it's a fait accompli. He's going to be confirmed, and so Democrats are basically doing they have to do a certain level of resistance for their base and for their rabid followers, but they know this is happening.
And the resistance, I think, even still was diminished because they know, he knows what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a time when the Democrats and Republicans both pushed for reforms in the FBI after the excesses of J. Edgar Hoover, and I would say outright blatant civil rights violations of J. Edgar Hoover. They both supported it because they were both victims of it. See, now only Republicans and Trump-aligned politicians are victims of it, so Democrats seem okay with the FBI being weaponized as long as it's weaponized against their opponents.
That's true, and the question is what to do about it. And you got a bipartisan consensus. It's clear that they don't want Kash to do too much. Senator Kennedy and Senator Tillis. Oh, don't go burn it down, Kash.
Right.
Well, frankly, what happened at the FBI makes me wonder whether the FBI can exist and continue to exist as a law enforcement entity. And you know, and I only half jokingly say this, and probably less so than that, is should Kash Patel be the last FBI director? That's my approach on it in terms of what they've done. Let's not forget what they've done.
I used to think that, Tom. I did. I used to think that the FBI, because they've had so much power and it's so, it seems to be so politicized and corrupt that it can't be fixed. But I think Kash Patel is the last chance. I think Kash could go in there and he could fix it. If not, it's over. All right, we got to leave it there. Always great talking with you.
Thanks,
You're
Tom.
a good guy. Tom
You're
Fitton.
welcome, guys. Thank you.
We love us some Judicial Watch, judicialwatch.org. Real oversight here in Washington.
Miss anything? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Get today's breaking news on the Vince Colonnese Show, weekdays 3 to 6, right here on WMAL.
I've been told, Patrice Onwuka, that Donald Trump was completely out of line and irresponsible for raising hiring practices at the FAA and air traffic controllers into the military and putting diversity and other attributes over merit, that was inappropriate yesterday after the crash. But interesting note, Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington, during the confirmation hearing of Robert Kennedy for Health and Human Services, she seemed to point to his nomination as an example of what went wrong with the crash. Weirdly, I don't know. You explain it to me. Here's cut 45, Patty Murray.
HHS has really broad and critical responsibilities to protect and preserve healthcare and social services, from women's health to child care to biomedical research. That's just a few. In light of last night's tragedy, I do want to express my thoughts and prayers. But it is, I think, a painful reminder to all of us that we need competent people running our federal agencies to respond when a crisis strikes.
Oh, okay.
Wait.
So within the context of Robert Kennedy running Health and Human Services, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
I think she proved the point that they need to confirm President Trump's nominees ASAP in case there is another unexpected tragedy that demands strong, smart leadership at the top. Is that what she's saying? If that's what she's saying, then yeah, we're in agreement. Maybe she meant it in another way.
She wants to make sure that the Secretary of Health and Human Services is supremely competent, yet she was totally on board with a man who delusionally thinks that he's a woman and dresses up as a woman as the Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Goodness.
By the way, a man
Rachel
who was
Levine.
on board with Rachel Levine, the artist formerly known as Richard. And he's, of course, fully on board with mutilating young children and their genitals. So, you know, I don't really hold much. I don't think their opinions carry much weight in this regard, and they should probably just keep it to themselves at this point.